Welcome. Welcome to lunch. Is everybody having a good time? Have you learned anything yet today? Great. Now will you please rise for the presentation of colors from Headquarters and Support Battalion, Marine Corps Installations West, Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton, and the national anthem sung by First Lieutenant Savannah Frank, Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton. Please remain standing until the honor guard exits.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
I want to thank the color guard and First Lieutenant Frank. That's a powerful voice out of a very small first lieutenant. Please enjoy your lunch, and the program will resume after dessert is served. Thank you. Hello again, and again, and again. Hello. Shh. Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much. When I learned that I would have the great honor of introducing our next speaker, I asked one of my staffers, who was a former Air Force guy, how do you introduce a fighter pilot? And he smiled and said, sir, fighter pilots usually introduce themselves. Well, that's a little unfair to our guest. I've had the great honor of working with Admiral Winnefeld during his tenure as Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Like all leaders, his ability is spoken through deeds, not words. Many of you don't know this, but our speaker was captain of the USS Enterprise during the 9/11 attacks. His crew was tired after a 6-month deployment. That morning, they were steaming to a final port call in South Africa. When Captain Winnefeld learned of the tactics, he turned his 4.5 acres of American soil 180 degrees, squeezed everything he could get out of those 8 nuclear reactors, and got his 60-some aircraft and 4,600 crew members on station in the Arabian Sea, all within 24 hours. The Enterprise's crew flew over 700 combat missions in the first few months of the war. He didn't hesitate, he didn't take a vote. He acted decisively and led the crew that he had trained into war. What more can America ask of her sailors? Now, I know he'll say, I'm really not in the Navy now, I'm joint. I said, but I noticed the uniform. I also would like to mention the Admiral's skill as a recruiter. Now, he might not know he's a recruiter because he never served a tour as a recruiter, but he played a key role in one of the greatest Navy recruitment campaigns of all time. I'm talking, of course, about the film Top Gun. After the film hit the big screen, the LA Times reported that 90% of applicants to aviation officer candidate school had seen the movie. When I heard that, I was surprised. I couldn't believe it was only 90%. Admiral Winnefeld was an advisor to that movie. Now, I don't speak Navy, but I think a Bravo Zulu is a good thing for the Admiral. I could go through his entire bio. Suffice it to say, it's impressive as he is, but we're here to listen to him speak, not me. It's been an honor working with you, Admiral. Thank you for your years of service, and thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Winnefeld, Vice Chairman of our Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Yeah. So in the back room, there we go. I was going to say, did everybody notice that he got everybody quiet without even using a gavel? It's a testament to, Representative McKeon's amazing stature. Let me tell you, it's a real pleasure for me today to be able to stand in for Chairman Dempsey, who's visiting our troops in Iraq. I think most of you may have seen that on your iPads and iPhones and Blackberries already. And it's really an honor to do so in such a breathtaking setting. I really am honored to be with you here on this stage today. It's also a little bit of a reunion to me, as Chairman McKeon referred. My formative years as a naval aviator occurred while Ronald Reagan was serving as President of the United States. And I spent a lot of time during those days flying around in a Tomcat, just like the one that's out the back door of the building. Now, today also gives me the opportunity to add my own personal thanks to that of many, many people in this room, to Chairman Buck McKeon, for his tremendous leadership of the House Armed Services Committee over a period in our history when we really needed to benefit from his steady and collegial hand on the tiller. So I want to thank you very much, sir. Heartfelt thanks from all of us in uniform for your exceptional patriotism, your selfless service, and above all, your uncompromising leadership. Thank you. Kind of turned the tables on you there, didn't I, sir? Okay. That kind of leadership is something we're really going to need in this rare, fleeting, and important moment in the rhythm of United States security policy. It's rare because we only have a post-election moment like this every couple of years. It's fleeting because our nation will soon plunge into another long and possibly divisive presidential campaign. And it's important because the trajectory of the security environment and the ongoing turbulence in defense funding have upset the strategic balance among ends, ways, and means of our nation's security, and we need to reset it. As President Reagan once said, faithfully quoting John Adams, "Facts are stubborn things." Well, that strategic balance is a very stubborn thing. There is no free lunch. except for this lunch. Oh, sorry. Seriously, if we're wise, we'll drive that strategic balance back to a favorable equilibrium before it's too late. If we're not, then we're going to have to live together with the consequences. So I'd like to spend my time today talking about that balance, beginning with the environment in which it is either driven by or that it drives. While we've been fully invested in two of the three longest wars in our nation's history, all of which were overseas counterinsurgencies, the rest of the world did not stand idly by. Major states like Russia and China, convinced that the unipolar moment was fading fast and capitalizing on our distraction, began asserting themselves. Russia's recent aggression in Ukraine is by far not the only example. In protecting our allies against potential mischief from these powers, we've always counted on our overmatch in capability and capacity to offset the challenges of distance and initiative. That overmatch is now in jeopardy. Both of these powers are investing in new capabilities, including precision-guided weapons, stealth, unmanned platforms in our traditional domains, and new capabilities in the space and cyber domains. And both are modernizing their nuclear forces. Meanwhile, we contend every day with two insecure, authoritarian regimes in North Korea and Iran who covet weapons of mass destruction as insurance policies. At the same time, violent extremism and deep instability continue to feed off the deep social and religious divisions engulfing the great swath of North and East Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia. Too many fault zones for me to mention in detail today, but they're drawing the lion's share of our daily operational effort and continually challenging us to balance resources and risk against our national security interests in the region. Other threats present different challenges, including the transnational criminal organizations that are deeply impacting our friends in Latin America and that affect many thousands of Americans each year, and pandemics such as the recent Ebola crisis in West Africa, and natural disasters and tensions exacerbated by droughts and food shortages. Some say conditions today are spiraling out of control. I'd sort of echo Richard Haas, who says it's really more a perennial cyclic shift away from order and towards disorder. And even if the number of deputies committee meetings I attend in Washington are indicative of how chaotic things are, we've also seen some pretty chaotic times in the past, chaotic times that Ronald Reagan experienced. Further, I'd join many in this audience who would argue strongly against any perception of America in decline, based on our strengths in geography, economics, energy and other resources, creativity, demographics, diversity, higher education, and of course, military power. But our world remains a dynamic and very dangerous place. As Bob Gates was fond of saying about predicting the future, we have a 100% record. We always get it wrong. So what about the other variable currently upsetting our strategic balance, namely means? Means, of course, are the resources the citizens of the United States entrust to us via the Congress to provide for the common defense using the capability, capacity, and readiness of our military forces. Today, a trifecta of challenges is undermining the means element of our strategic balance. The first leg of the trifecta is probably the most difficult. Our people tell me, and Bob Hale's in the audience, used to do it, tell me that the total defense spending, including wartime supplementals, has fallen by 21% since its most recent peak. The base budget alone has fallen by 15% since I assumed my job as vice chairman on the same day in 2011 that the Budget Control Act was enacted, all while we need at least 2% real growth to maintain our capabilities. This is having its inevitable effect. We aren't modernizing as fast as we should in a highly competitive technical landscape. Our capability overmatch is slipping. Almost every element of our force structure is also shrinking, while potential threats expand. So we'll have a hard time overmatching in capacity when we need to. And we're in a real struggle to recover the readiness we've lost over the last couple of years, particularly that lost during the FY13 sequester period, because we're running our force so hard. Somehow, our amazing young men and women out there are managing all of this, but reduced readiness applied to a smaller force means fewer units are ready to fight. So we're meeting our daily deployment demands, but it's put a real dent in our ability to surge. I wouldn't disagree that some of our budget reductions to this point are needed to help with the national security imperative of deficit reduction. After all, no strong nation ever had a weak economy. But those reductions have pushed us hard against the bounds of manageable risk. The other two legs of the trifecta could push us across it. The second leg comes in the form of what we call the congressional no's of member interests. Despite the very helpful efforts of some of our friends in Congress, Chairman McKee in particular, the most severe pending markups of our FY 2015 budget submission currently include $70 billion worth of those no's across the next few years. This includes $39 billion against our efforts to make sensible adjustments to compensation, and $31 billion against our ability to clear out the underbrush of old force structure and better manage what we have left, as well as a prohibition on unloading excess base infrastructure. Imagine a business being told that it must retain old product lines that siphon away the resources that allow it to compete in a global marketplace, or being forced by law to maintain 24% excess infrastructure. They'd contend that it's already hard enough to compete in the global marketplace, and those kinds of restrictions would put them out of business. But we can't afford to be out of business in our lethal market, and $70 billion is not a trivial amount, especially when you consider the additional resources that we're going to need to buttress our nuclear deterrent enterprise and improve our space resiliency. Uncertainty is the third leg of the means trifecta. Our next big event occurs when the current continuing resolution runs out next month, followed sometime next year by a debt ceilings showdown. Somewhere in there, we hope to get our authorization and appropriations bills. It's been about 5 years since the Congress enacted the former on time, and 6 years since it will have enacted the latter on time. Twice we've received our funding 6 months late. If any of us were that consistently late paying our taxes, we'd be in jail right now. And when we have gotten a budget recently, it's only addressed our problems 1 or 2 years at a time, which, while helping us recover readiness, to be sure, is devastating to modernization programs. But there's more. We're still facing a possible sequester level cut of $500 billion in the FY16 FYDP. Sequester is a bet that went terribly wrong, and its salami slice method is the most destructive way possible to reduce a budget. And I don't have to tell this savvy audience that our strategic balance truly becomes untenable under sequester-size cuts. So back to that strategic balance. If the security environment continues on its current track, and assuming for the moment that we can't fix our means problems, then all we have left to tinker with is ends and ways. Ways are about putting the right money in the right places and doing the right things with it and doing those things the right way. Improving our ways is hard work because it means change. And there are a lot of institutional and external factors in our world aligned against any kind of change, especially those that would make us more efficient. And if you're heavily invested in a particular warfighting theology or platform or technology, the last thing you want to hear is that it's just not as relevant as it used to be. But risk aversion and complacency are how companies have failed in the past. Just ask Polaroid. Richard Pascal characterized it as using the catchphrase, "Equilibrium is the precursor to death." Fortunately, we have a number of things going on in the ways world. On the business side, I'm very supportive of having an empowered defense business board. And Frank Kendall, who's sitting right over here, his Better Buying Power 3.0 initiative is gathering momentum, and it's going to make a big difference for us. And my partner, Deputy Secretary Bob Work, is beginning to really dig into the details of what's going on in the back offices of the various chunks of our enterprise. We need to do more of this, and quickly, and it needs to be hard-nosed. That's why I was so delighted to see that there was a panel on this topic earlier today. I have a lot of friends on that panel, and I'm really looking forward to reading the transcript and learning from it. Improving our ways also means embarking on more and better work on innovation, which I'm happy to see is also one of your panels this afternoon, and I want to see that one as well. Secretary Hagel will have a few things to say about this later today, and I don't want to steal his thunder. But among other things, we're looking for the next technological offset, something we can do that nobody else can, at least for a while. This is going to require linking more innovation in strategic and operational concepts with more innovation in technology. They both have to feed off of each other. I believe the next offset will probably be more about payloads than platforms, and it's going to involve every warfighting domain and will almost certainly be a combination of diverse technologies. Thus, it will require bright, broadly educated, and empowered young people coming together to forge previously unimagined synergies. That's why I was rooting around in Silicon Valley yesterday and this morning, vacuuming up as many ideas as I could. We really need to deliver on this, but it's not going to be easy, partly because so much of it involves leveraging commercial technologies and practices, and our potential adversaries may be quicker than we are due to all of our red tape. And some of those opportunities may be found in less advantaged service communities, which means it could be hard to find committed champions. So as we do this, we have to avoid Liddell Hart's maxim, the only thing harder than getting a new idea into the military mind is getting an old one out. There's much more to the ways piece. I don't have enough time to cover it all, but it's probably the most interesting part of my job. Unfortunately, though, as much promise as there is in this area, we can't count on our advancements in ways to completely offset the trifecta of means reductions, especially if we end up under a sequester. Thus, we're left with ends as the final variable. I would submit that our most fundamental ends are the national security interests that we all seek to protect. An abstract, enduring set of those individual interests could be the subject of their very own speech. As my colleagues would tell you, it's a discussion that I love to have. Such a list, especially when it's prioritized, enables a more meaningful conversation about strategy, because it's a powerful way to support decisions regarding the use of force, regarding allocating scarce resources, and about associated risk. Henry Kissinger once said, "No country can act wisely simultaneously in every part of the globe at every moment in time." So when means are decreasing and we've done everything we can with ways, we may have to make tough choices on where to accept more risk to our interests, presumably the lower-ranking interests. But I don't know very many Americans who really want to do that. Not only would we never compromise on protecting our homeland, we Americans think we can solve any problem around the globe, and we're determined to preserve American leadership. It's who we are. It's in our DNA. That's why it's our ambition to have a strategy completely driven by ends and totally unconstrained by means. But that brings me back to where I started. Oliver Wendell Holmes said, "I wouldn't give a fig for simplicity on this side of complexity, but I'd give my life for simplicity on the far side of complexity." People in our business sometimes fall into the trap of confusing the ends of strategy with strategy itself, which is to reach for simplicity on the near side of complexity. But there's much more to it. Whether we like it or not, strategy has to be the whole enchilada. We need to get to the far side of the whole ends, ways, and means discussion if we're going to get ourselves back in balance. Like most of you, I'd rather restore equilibrium by preserving the ends of our national security interests as best we can while maintaining manageable risk. And if we're going to do that, we're going to have to work harder on ways and means. There are several things we need to do. First, throughout our department, we need to reach even harder for efficiencies. We're determined to do better. The Congress should not only demand this, they should support it as well by removing some of the barriers we have to becoming more efficient. Second, We need to embrace new operational plans, concepts, and technologies that could change the complexion of our force, while avoiding what former IBM CEO Sam Palmisano said about companies under financial stress. You spend more time arguing amongst yourselves over a shrinking pie than looking to the future, so you miss the big turn. Well, we have to keep reaching for that big turn in this very precious moment we have, and we will. Third, we need to continue building a partnership with industry that raises the bar further on agility and speed on the one hand and cost and performance on the other, while doing so in a network secure way so we don't do our competitors' research and development for them. That's a tall order, but we have to do this, and we will. In the process, while we're conjuring up new disruptive payloads, we have a few platforms we need to get through what I call the V-22 window, in which a system struggles for a while, gets a bad reputation, we finally get it online, and then suddenly, before you know it, we just can't get enough of them because they're so good. Fourth, we need to continue to weigh both our investments and our commitments across the globe against a spectrum of prioritized national security interests. We really can do a lot as a nation, but we can't do everything. And we need to make sure we hold enough in reserve to do the most important things. And finally, we need our partners in Congress that, in executing their very important oversight role, get the means trifecta under control for us by providing adequate and predictable funding, as well as more flexibility in a number of areas that are important to us. There's still time to conference out some of the no's in this year's legislation. And it goes without saying in this wonderful group that we need an alternative to sequestration. Achieving this will require calm, mature, and collegial statesmen in the grandest tradition of American politics, like the man to whom this building is dedicated, like the man we honored a moment ago. I couldn't help reflecting a week ago as I visited a bunch of amazing, bright-eyed, and proud Marines and sailors down at Camp Lejeune and aboard USS Kearsarge. Young people with the courage to sacrifice everything they have for our nation. People who will always rise to the occasion and do the right thing for us, just as Medal of Honor recipient Sal Giunta, who I think is in the room today, did. We owe these sons and daughters of America the very best we have during and after their time in service to our country. And we need to strap on the same kind of courage they have and get the ways and means of our balance right, or we will have to tell them that we let them down. One of tonight's Peace Through Strength honorees, Senator John McCain, told the Brigade of Midshipmen at the United States Naval Academy in 2012, "We will only fail if we give up and become the first American generation to accept our destiny rather than make it." Well, my son became one of those midshipmen this last summer, and his little brother wants to be a Marine. I'm proud of them both. I'll soon hand the torch off to them. We have an obligation to ensure that they and many others like them have what they need to keep that torch burning brightly as they take their turn in making our destiny. We're from the United States of America. We can do this. Thanks for inviting me here today and for your interest and your support, and in many cases your service in the great cause of keeping our nation strong and safe. And may God shower his blessings on the men and women across the globe who are doing exactly that as we're here today. Thank you very much. And I think I have time for a couple of questions. Take it away, Michael.
Ladies and gentlemen, to moderate our program this afternoon, please welcome Mr. Michael Casteen, member of the Board of Trustees for the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation.
Thank you, Admiral. It's great to have you here and everybody else. It's been a fantastic day so far. We will be taking questions from the audience. We don't have a lot of time, but if you'd like to make your way to the microphones over here by the stair, and then one over here by table 29. But in the meantime, I'll get us started and ask the first question. If you'll allow me to set the stage a little bit, Admiral. Approximately 10 years ago, the U.S. spent over $60 billion and deployed 150,000 troops in the Middle East, keeping us engaged in a conflict that spans centuries. Today, the Islamic State and other extremists continue to terrorize Iraq and Syria. Last week, the U.S. announced a new deployment to the region, doubling the number of troops in the area to 3,000. Another $5 billion is expected to be spent there over the next year. Although the reasons for deployment are considered different today, one can't help but think, and I assume my fellow trustees would agree, if President Reagan were here today, he would be talking about peace through strength, but he also might be thinking, there you go again. Measured against the backdrop of sequestration and all the other hotspots in the world, and after years of trying, how do we define success for our efforts in the Middle East?
Okay, very good question. And by the way, that's not the only effort in the Middle East, right? It's very diverse. You mentioned President Reagan. As I reflect on that question, I think back to the conflict that he had so much to do with ending, which was actually a generational struggle, like the one that we are in right now. And it wasn't the occasional use of force that we had to employ during that period that ended the Soviet Union and resulted in winning that conflict. It was really the fact that the Soviet Union was undermined by its own internal contradictions. You could also argue that it was undermined by the fax machine. And you know, it was going to end in due course. We all knew that. Ronald Reagan knew that. And finally it did. I think that this is a very similar generational struggle. There are times, more often than we would like, that we will have to use force during this generational struggle to maintain protection of our national security interests in the region, and they are considerable. And that's what we're doing today. We're doing it in, I think, a very carefully considered way. General Lloyd Austin, it's working. We're making some progress there, but we have a long way to go, and we need strategic patience. But I would tell you that it will end not by the sword, but most likely when two things happen. One, when the underlying causes, the economic and the social divisions that cause a young Muslim male to have no other recourse than to reach out to extremism, to try to achieve something, to try to gain some sort of confidence and hope in the world, when that is over, and when we can somehow have the two great divides inside the Islamic religion resolve their differences, those two things are probably going to have to happen before this is over, and that's going to take a generation to do. We have a lot of young men and women out there every day who are dedicated to defending this nation, who are involved in that struggle, but I do believe that that's what's going to, you know, how this will end, if that's what you're asking.
Yes, thank you very much. Questions? No one has a question? Tell us, Admiral, you have so many things going on, and you outlaid talks about innovation, or you were talking about innovation and a number of things around the world. What today is keeping you awake at night?
What's keeping me awake at night? How much time do you have?
Well, I'll give you all you want, but I think they're going to cut us off.
Actually, in the amount of time that I actually have for sleep, I rarely have a problem sleeping. But if something were going to keep me awake, I would say I would be kept awake if I felt that we were doing something that were fundamentally against our national security interests, or that we were doing something morally, ethically wrong in the world. That's one thing. I would also lose sleep if I felt that we were committing our young men and women in combat where they might lose their lives in a cause that was not a high national security interest of the United States, and that we would ensure that we control the risk if it's a low national security interest. And if I were a really light sleeper, I would worry that we're not going to get the means piece fixed right. But internally, I would worry that we will not be innovative enough in this brief moment that we have to prepare for whatever comes next, or that if we're innovative enough, that we won't have the gumption to take the leaps that are required to capitalize on that innovation. And then finally, if something were going to keep me up at night, I think it's the institutional challenges that we're working very hard to resolve. Things like, as the Secretary mentioned yesterday, making sure that our nuclear deterrent enterprise is in the best possible shape it can be, making sure that we put to rest once and for all the scourge of sexual assault in our force, and that we make sure we're doing things like taking care of our wounded warriors and the veterans the way we should be. So that's sort of a rough cut on what would keep me awake at night if I, had that problem.
Well said.
But there's plenty of going on to keep us busy.
I think we have a contestant. Peter?
Yes, Admiral. Fantastic speech. Thank you very much. My name is Pete Hegseth. I run a veterans organization. Quick question. General Daniel Bulger recently wrote a book called Why We Lost, and had a critique of generalship in Iraq and Afghanistan. Not a gotcha question, sir, an earnest one. Do you think we lost in Iraq and Afghanistan? If so, why? If not, why not?
Fair question. I do not think we lost in Afghanistan and Iraq. What we did in Iraq was give the Iraqi people the chance to set themselves on a course that would allow them to have a government that would look out for the needs and the rights and the prosperity of all Iraqis. And we put to rest a Islamic insurgency that had the potential for threatening the United States. The Iraqis squandered that over the course of a number of years. And we're back there in a different way to try to help them regain that. We think we have achieved a government that will work with us, that at least has said it has the goal of looking out for all the interests of all the Iraqi people. And we have an Iraqi security force that we tested, and they are willing to fight, and we're going to support them in that fight the right way, and we think they've got a good shot of recovering from the disruption they've just been through. And the same thing has happened in Afghanistan. We have given the Afghan people, through the blood and sacrifice of many American young men and women, an opportunity to have a brighter future. I think they're learning from the lessons of Iraq, and I think that they're going to do a better job with this, and we are, you can't call anything a slam dunk in this world, but thanks to the great efforts of guys like Joe Dunford, who's sitting over here, we've put Afghanistan on a course that the success is in their hands. Thank you for that question.
Admiral, I think we have time for one more question, and we have a questioner.
Hopefully it's well, I don't think it'll be an easy one to answer, but given that we can't choose everything all the time, especially given the fiscal place that we're in right now, if we have a choice in either to maintain our current capabilities and stature in the world with our current military presence, or fund future development and technology to make sure we're still going to have that ability in the future. And if you only have one choice to sustain and maintain what we have, or maintain and finance the future, which would you choose? Which one are we going to have to choose potentially?
I don't want to choose.
I know.
Because frankly, we owe it to our young men and women to put them in the environment, to put them in a place where those choices are not false choices. They're the choices that will do the best for them. We talked, though, about a balance among ends, ways, and means. There is a natural balance among capability, capacity, and readiness, and we work hard every day to try to strike the right balance. It's hard in this environment, and it's approached differently by the 4 different services in the Department of Defense through the wise leadership of their secretaries and their service chiefs. So it's a hard question to answer because each service has a different need in that area based on their missions, ongoing missions, and the way they make up their force. If you have a force that's very modernization heavy, such as the Air Force and the Navy, they're going to have to give a little bit more attention to that. Meanwhile, you have a Marine Corps and an Army that have been run very hard over the last decade, and they're trying to recover their readiness while making sure that they can continue to exercise the commitments that we have today. So it's a great question. It's a problem we confront every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. And before we let you go, just a couple of quick things. One, I wanted to let you know that your recruiting efforts are still working. My godson enlisted in the Navy and started last week, so okay. He's hopefully will be following
the ultimate in motorsports. Okay.
There you go. But the panels 6 and 7 will be starting in a few minutes, so we'd encourage you to get to your panel. But thank you, Admiral. Fantastic to have you here. Appreciate it.